I'm Philippa Lockridge, 47, and I spent 25 years in the Navy taking apart the things that were built to kill the people who come to take them apart. For years, I let people be wrong about me. The clerk who slid me a dependent form, the officer at the club who asked if I was enjoying my tour of the base, all of it, because correcting somebody cost them more than it ever gained me. But when a lieutenant in a bar in Coronado decided that the scar on my face was the entertainment for the evening, and his own captain crossed the room and put 3 words in his ear, I had to decide what kind of officer I was going to be about it. Have you ever been written off in one look by somebody who had no idea who you were? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after being wronged, hit that like button and subscribe. The summer of 2001, in a pool in Florida, I could not tie a knot underwater to save my life. There were 29 of us in that class, and 4 of us were women, and the instructor, standing on the deck in the heat, had a way of saying things that took the temperature out of them. He told us on the first morning that the pipeline did not care what anybody in it thought about anybody else in it. He said it the way a man reads a weather report. I failed the knot test. I went down on a breath, got my hands on the line, and came up with something that would have embarrassed a child at a dock. The instructor did not yell. He wrote something on a clipboard, and I did it again 3 days later, and I passed by a margin so thin that I have never once told anybody the number. Nobody in my family had ever worn a uniform. There was no story anybody told me at a kitchen table about a grandfather in a war. I read what the job was in a pamphlet at a career fair when I was 20 years old, and I could not stop thinking about it. And 11 months later, I was 22 and standing at attention in a set of dress whites that did not fit me, taking an oath in front of a professor of chemistry who had agreed to hold the Bible. I got to Coronado in 2002 as a lieutenant junior grade, 23 years old, with a dive qualification and a school certificate, and absolutely no idea what I was doing. The first person who took a real interest in me was a master chief named Deacon Trask. He was 44 that year. He had been in the Navy since before I could read, and he sat my qualification board with 2 other chiefs and a coffee cup he never once drank from. He kept me in that chair for 2 hours. Then he failed me. I want to be clear that he was right to. I had answered 11 questions correctly, and I had answered every single one of them quickly. And at the end of it, he closed the folder and looked at me the way you look at a car you are thinking about buying. I did not fail you because you were wrong, he said. I failed you because you answered fast. Fast is how people end up carrying their friends. I came back 3 weeks later and sat the board again, and I took my time on every question, including 2 I knew cold, and I passed. Afterward, he walked me out to the parking lot and told me that I was going to be fine, which from him was close to a parade. My first real call came in Iraq in 2003 when I was 24. A pressure plate under the lip of a culvert on a supply route, laid by somebody who was learning as fast as we were. I remember the weight of the suit more than anything else about that day. People imagine the suit as armor. It is closer to a piece of furniture that you have agreed to wear. It took me 40 minutes to do a thing that Trask, on his worst day, would have done in 12. I walked back up the road afterward, and I was ashamed of the time, and I said so out loud. And he told me that 40 minutes was the correct answer every time, and that he would rather have a slow officer than a decorated one. There is no version of this job that is fast. Every man I ever met who is fast at it is a name on a wall in Florida now, and I mean that literally, and I have stood in front of that wall and read it. I made lieutenant in 2005. I ran teams. I got good at the part of the work that nobody talks about, which is not the walk down to the device, but the 2 hours before it. Standing in the dust with a map and 4 opinions, deciding what is actually true. In 2007, a second-class technician named Teo Salcedo turned up on my team, 22 years old, straight out of the pipeline, with a photograph of his mother taped inside the lid of his kit, and a habit that I had never seen in anybody else, before or since. He narrated, out loud the entire time in a low, even voice. He described what his own hands were doing, reaching for the shears, turning the body of the thing a 1/4 inch, setting it down. The first time I heard it over the radio, I thought he was talking to me, and I nearly answered him. "Ma'am, I talk when I work," he said when I asked him about it that evening. "It keeps my hands honest. If I go quiet, that is when you should worry about me." For 4 years, on 2 deployments and about 100 calls that never made anybody's news, I listened to that voice describing its own hands. You learn a person that way. I knew when he was tired by the 3rd sentence. I knew when something on the ground was not matching what we had briefed, because the narration would slow down and get shorter and turn into single words. By 2010, I was 31, and the officer in charge of a mobile platoon working out of Coronado, and Trask put in his retirement papers after 30 years. At the ceremony, they read the whole record, and it took a while. He stood there through it, with his hands behind his back, looking like a man waiting for a bus. Afterward, he found me by the water and said the only piece of advice he ever gave me that I have repeated to other people. "The day you send somebody down a road, you would not walk yourself. You are done," he said. "Not fired. Done. You will still have the job. You just will not have anything left in it." I told him I understood. He said, "Everybody says that." There is a photograph on my desk from that year. The 2010 platoon, 11 of us, standing in front of a truck in the kind of squinting sunlight that makes everybody look like they are laughing at something. Salcedo is on the far left. Everybody in that picture is alive in it. That is the part people never understand about photographs from this line of work. They are not memorials when you take them. They are just a Tuesday. 2 things were happening at the 2 ends of my life, 15 years apart, and I am going to tell you both of them at once, because that is how they sit in my head now, and I have stopped trying to separate them. Start with February of 2011 in southern Afghanistan. We had done 3 calls in 9 days, which is not a remarkable number, except that all 3 had been the same shape. A device on the road, obvious enough to find. And then a second one, placed off the shoulder, in the flat spot where a person would kneel, or where a truck would stage, or where somebody would stand to take a photograph of the first one. Salcedo was 26 by then, and a first class, and he was the one who said it out loud in the tent, with a plate of food in front of him that he was not eating. "They are not building these for the trucks anymore, ma'am," he said. "They are building them for us." Nobody argued with him. That is the part I remember. 11 people in a tent, and not one person said he was being dramatic, because everybody had been thinking it for a week and had not wanted to be the one to put it in a sentence. Now come forward 15 years to January of 2026 in Coronado, California, where I had just reported in to begin the longest turnover of my career. I was 47 years old, a Navy captain, and I had 6 months of overlap ahead of me before I would take Explosive Ordnance Disposal Group 1 from the officer who had it. You arrive early, you learn everything, and for a while you are the most senior person in the building with no actual authority. On my 3rd day, I went to the Pass and Identification office to get a new access card because mine had my old command on it. The clerk behind the glass was about 22 years old and perfectly polite. She slid a form under the window and asked me for my sponsor's last name. The form was for dependents. I have been mistaken for a wife in every duty station I have ever had. It stopped being interesting to me somewhere around 2009. I did not correct her, because correcting her would have taken 4 minutes and a small amount of her dignity, and I did not need either of those things. I asked for the other form and filled it out. She read it, went a little pink, and said, "Ma'am, I am so sorry." I told her she had no way of knowing, and that the line behind me was 6 people long, back to March of 2011 in the first week. I walked a device alone on a road that a task force wanted open by dark, and about 11 meters back from it, I found a command wire running off into a tree line that nobody had cleared, and I stopped. There is a particular kind of phone call you make when you stop. On the other end of it was a major who had a schedule, and the schedule was not a stupid thing to have. He had people who needed to move. He asked me how confident I was. "The road opens tomorrow, or it opens with somebody in it," I said. "Those are the options I have." He did not like it. He also did not overrule me because the system, when it works, does not let him. We cleared the tree line the next morning and found what was in it, and the road opened at 11 in the morning instead of at dark, and nobody wrote anything down about any of it because nothing happened. That is what a good day looks like in my line of work. It looks like a delay. February of 2026, back in Coronado. There was a hail and farewell at the Officers' Club, the kind of evening where a command changes about 11% of its people and marks it with a buffet. I went because the outgoing Commodore asked me to, and I stood near a window in a civilian dress with a glass of wine I was not drinking. A lieutenant commander I had never met came over and was extremely nice to me. He asked whether I was enjoying my tour of the base. He had decided, reasonably enough, that I was with the congressional staff delegation that had been on the installation that week, and he was doing exactly what a good officer does at those events, which is talk to the person standing by themselves. My deputy saw it from across the room. Commander Marin Okonkwo was 38 years old, and she had been the chief staff officer at that group for 2 years. And she was very good at her job and had absolutely no patience for this particular thing. She started across the carpet with her jaw set. I caught her eye and moved my head about a 1/4 inch, and she stopped. Afterward, in the parking lot, she let me have it in the way that a commander lets a captain have it, which is with a lot of ma'am in it. "Ma'am, you let people be wrong about you constantly," she said. "I do." "May I ask why?" "Because being wrong about me is not a crime," I said. "I am not going to spend a command tour arresting people for it." She said, "That works fine for you." And then she stopped herself because she is disciplined, and I told her to finish the sentence, and she would not. I found out later what the end of that sentence was. It took a bar and a lieutenant and about 6 weeks for me to hear it. That is where the two halves of this were sitting in the middle of February. Behind me, 15 years back, a road in a country I have not returned to. In front of me, a building I would be responsible for in 4 months, full of people I did not know yet. I remember standing in the group headquarters parking lot at dusk on a Friday in jeans, looking up at it. Anybody driving past would have seen a woman in her 40s looking at an office building. There is nothing about me standing still that tells anybody anything. I have never minded that. It has been for 25 years the most restful thing about my life. The bar is half a block off the amphibious base on the water side of the street, and it has been there longer than I have been in the Navy. It is not a themed place. There is no plaque wall, no flags on the ceiling, none of the merchandise that shows up in bars that have decided to be about the military. It is dark, it has 11 stools, and the man who owns it and pours in it is a retired senior chief named Wade Brannigan, who is 60 and has been doing it for 11 years. I went in on a Thursday evening in March at about 7:40 after a day of turnover briefs that had run 4 hours long. I was in jeans and a gray sweater. Brannigan did not know me from anybody. He put a coaster down and asked me a question I have thought about a lot since. "You want the good stool or the quiet stool?" "Quiet," I said. "The quiet stool is at the short end of the bar, by the register, where the taps block the sightline from the tables." He poured me a beer and did not ask about my face, because he knows exactly what a blast scar looks like and how many of them come into his bar in a year. Mine runs from under my left ear, along the jaw, down the side of my neck, and under my collar. It is 15 years old. It is not dramatic anymore, if it ever was. It is a pale line and a change in the texture of the skin, and in most light it reads as something that happened in a car. There was a platoon in the corner, 6 or 7 of them, loud in the good way, celebrating something. I found out later they had certified that afternoon on their final workup event, which for a SEAL platoon is a real day and worth a real night. Their officer was a lieutenant named Gage Prosser. He was 28. He was 4 beers into the evening, and he was telling a story with his hands. I want to be fair to him here, because being unfair to him would make this a smaller story than it is. He was not a bad officer. He had a platoon that had just passed a hard thing, and he was young, and he was in a bar in his own town, and he had reached the point in the evening where a man decides he is funny. He saw my jaw in the mirror behind the bottles. "Shark, or just a bad surgeon?" He said it at the volume you use for a table, not for a person, which meant it carried the whole length of the room. His table laughed, most of them, the way people laugh at 9 at night when they have been drinking since 4. One of them did not. A lieutenant junior grade named Ike Halverson, 26 years old, his assistant platoon commander, put his glass down. "Gage," he said, "sit down." That should have been the end of it. It is the moment where a man who has had 4 beers takes the exit that his friend has just built for him. Prosser did not take it. He stood up with his glass in his hand and came halfway to the bar, and he said the second thing. And the second thing is the one I actually remember, because the first one was a joke about my face, and the second one was about who I was. "Around here, scars come with stories," he said. "Yours came with a receipt." The room did not go silent. That is a thing people put in stories, and it is almost never true. What happened was that about a third of the room stopped, and the rest of it kept talking, and the noise developed a hole in the middle of it. 2 of his own men had put their drinks down. Brannigan came down the bar without hurrying, put both hands flat on the wood, and looked at him. "Lieutenant," he said, "you are finished." I set my glass down, and I did not say one word. There's a thing that happens to my face when I decide not to answer somebody. And I have been told by 2 different people who love me that it is worse than answering. I do not do it on purpose. It is just what is left when I take everything else off. At the far end of the room, at a high table by the door, there had been a group of 4 men for about 20 minutes. One of them was a Navy captain named Emery Vandermeer, 51 years old, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Group 1, in a polo shirt, out that night for the farewell of one of his chiefs. He knew who I was. We had sat on the same video call 11 days earlier about a joint certification schedule, and he had shaken my hand at a conference room door in January. He put his beer down on the high table and crossed the floor without hurrying at all. He came up on Prosser's left side, put one hand flat on the lieutenant's shoulder, and leaned in and said 3 words into his ear. "Leave now, son." Prosser was out the door in under 10 seconds. He put the glass on the nearest table, not his own, and he went, past his entire platoon, past the 2 women at the end of it, past Halverson, out into the parking lot in front of every person he works with. He did not know why. That is the part I noticed, standing there with a beer in front of me. Vandermeer never told him. He did not lean in and say a name or a rank or explain the arithmetic to him. He gave him an order of 6 syllables, and he let him carry the rest of it out the door on his own. He did not think the boy had earned an explanation. Then he came down the bar to me, and he did not apologize on Prosser's behalf, which I respected, because it was not his to apologize for, and we both knew it. He asked me one question. "Tonight or Monday?" "Monday," I said. "Let him carry it over the weekend." He nodded once and went back to his table. Brannigan poured me another beer that I had not asked for and would not let me pay for, and I sat there for about 11 more minutes, and then I put cash on the bar anyway and went home. Behind me, the stool Prosser had been sitting on was still rocking on its bad leg. Nobody in that corner said anything for about 5 seconds, which in a bar is a very long time. I drove home, and then I sat in my own driveway for a while with the engine off. I was not upset in the way you are probably imagining. What I was doing in that car was arithmetic, because that is what my head does, instead of being angry. He was 13 years old in March of 2011. Gage Prosser was 13, in a house somewhere, doing whatever a 13-year-old does on a Tuesday, on the day that put this line on my face. That is not an accusation. It is just a fact that arrived in the car with me, and it took the heat out of the whole evening. Then I went inside and did not sleep much, because the evening had opened the thing it was always going to open. Here is what happened, told properly, which I have done out loud maybe 4 times in 15 years. March of 2011, southern Afghanistan, a road with a culvert running under it. A patrol had found a device the day before and marked it and pulled back, and we came out in the morning to take it apart. The first device was not complicated. It was a pressure plate and a jug, and it was the 4th one of its kind that month, and if that had been the whole of the day, nobody would ever have written anything down. The problem was the second signature. The detector gave us something 11 meters back from the culvert, off the shoulder, in the flat spot, and it would not resolve into anything clean. It might have been metal from the road. It might have been the thing we had all been saying to each other in the tent for 3 weeks. Salcedo suited up for it. He was 26, he was the best technician I had. He had been on the ground for 4 months, and he was calmer than I was. I pulled him off it. "Back to the line, Teo." "Ma'am, I have got it." "Back to the line." He looked at me for about a second and a half, and then he said, "Yes, ma'am." And he started walking back, and I put the suit on, and I went down the road myself. That is not bravery. That is the rule a master chief gave me in a parking lot in 2010, and I was following it, and it is the only reason I can still do this job. I was 19 meters down and turned to the left, working, when the second device functioned. It was not the one I was kneeling next to. It was the one behind the safe line, laid in the flat spot where a recovery team stands, which is the thing Salcedo had said out loud in a tent in February, with a plate of food in front of him that he was not eating. It functioned while he was walking back to the line. The blast that killed him is not the one I was working on. I want to be exact about that, because everybody who tells the story for me gets it wrong, and it matters to me in a way that I have never fully been able to explain to anybody who was not there. What I have of the next part is not a sequence. It is the pressure, first arriving before the sound in a way that does not make sense and is true anyway. Then the sound, then a very long ringing and dust that came down like weather, and the fact that I was talking on the radio and could not hear my own voice in my own head. My left side took fragmentation. Jaw, neck, shoulder. I did not know it for about 4 minutes. People tell you that and you assume they are being tough about it, and it is not that. Your body is extremely good at scheduling. We got him back. I am not going to describe that part. I woke up properly in a hospital 14 days later, on the other side of a flight I do not remember, and 2 surgeries I was told about afterward. A nurse had covered the bathroom mirror with a towel, and on the 4th day, I took it off myself, because I would rather do a thing than wait for it. Deacon Trask flew out to see me. He was 53 and 3 years retired. He paid for the ticket himself, and he sat in the chair beside the bed and did not fill up the room with talking. He did not tell me it was not my fault. He has never once in his life said a thing he did not believe, and he was not going to start on a woman with her jaw wired. He said this instead: "You did it the right way, and it still went wrong. Both of those are true. You are going to have to carry them at the same time. Most people cannot, and that is what breaks them. Not the thing, the 2 things. I have carried them at the same time for 15 years. Some weeks the second one is heavier. Now come back to Coronado, to the Monday morning after the bar, 0800, the joint work up in brief, in a conference room at Naval Special Warfare Group 1 with the long table and the screen that never works on the first try. 2 SEAL platoons, 1 explosive ordnance disposal detachment from my group. Vandermeer on my right, Okonkwo 2 seats down on my left with the certification timeline in front of her. I was at the head of the table because the certification authority for the detachment sat with the group I was taking. I was in service dress, 4 gold stripes on the sleeve, the star above them, the badge above the ribbons. Prosser came in at 8:55 with a notebook in his hand. He got about 2 steps through the door and he stopped, and everything went out of his face at once. I watched him do the same arithmetic I had done in the driveway on Thursday night, only faster, and in front of 11 people who were waiting for him to sit down. He stood in that doorway for about 3 seconds, which does not sound long. It is very long. It is long enough for a scheduler to look up from a laptop and for the training officer to turn around in his chair. I did not say anything about it. I did not need to. I said, "Gentlemen, we are starting on time." And I looked back down at my timeline, and he came in and took the seat that was left for him, which was directly across from me at the far end of the table, where he was going to spend the next 50 minutes looking at the left side of my face. The brief ran 50 minutes, and I did not mention Thursday one time. I want to tell you what that took, and the honest answer is that it did not take very much, because the timeline was complicated, and I had a lot to do. 2 platoons sharing 1 detachment across a 6-week workup, a dive window that did not line up with a range window, and a certification event at the end of May that everything else had to be built backward from. That is the actual job. The job is a calendar. I called on him once. "Lieutenant Prosser, your dive window. Walk me through it." I used his rank and his name and his billet in the same voice I used for everybody else in that room, and I let him answer, and he answered well. He knew his platoon's schedule cold, which is not nothing at 28. His voice was not entirely steady for the first sentence, and then it was fine. That was the whole of it. That is the entire use I ever made of the most useful thing I have ever been handed. When it was over, I collected my folder and went back to my own building, and by lunchtime the pressure started coming at me from both directions, which is what happens when you decline to do the obvious thing. Okonkwo came in first at about 1 p.m. with a document already drafted. She had not waited for me to ask, and I want to be clear that this was correct of her. A chief staff officer who waits to be asked is decoration. She put it on the desk and stood there. "Ma'am, with respect, that needs a name on it." I read it. It was a good document. It was accurate. It was unemotional. It named the witnesses. And it would have ended his ability to be trusted with anything for about 2 years. "No," I said. "May I make the argument?" "Please." She made the institutional argument, which is the good one, and one I have made myself in other rooms. She said, "Ma'am, You are not the only person he is ever going to talk to like that. You are the version of this that can absorb it. You have 4 stripes and 25 years and a group. The next woman he does this to is going to be a second-class technician with 11 months in the community and no way at all to make it stop. That is the end of the sentence she would not finish in the parking lot in February. She got there eventually, and she was right too. I know, I said. That is exactly why it is not going in my complaint. She waited. If I file it, then the record says a captain was insulted, I said. That is a story about rank. It teaches him that the mistake was picking the wrong woman. I do not want him learning that. I want it in his record, written by his own chain, describing what he did in a bar to a person whose name is not in the document at all. She thought about it. She did not like it, and she thought about it, and she said, That is harder to make happen. It is, I said. That is why I'm going to go make it happen. 2 days later, I went to see Vandermeer in his office at the group. He had a photograph of a dive boat behind him and a stack of officer evaluations 2 inches high on the corner of the desk, which is the real furniture of command. He offered me the favor before I sat down. I think he had been planning to offer it since Thursday. I can make this go away for you, he said. Officer to officer, he will never be anywhere near you or your people again. Nothing on paper. Nothing on paper is a real gift. It is the currency senior officers hand each other. It means no board ever reads it, no promotion package ever carries it, and everybody involved gets to keep moving. I do not want it to go away, I said. I want it written down, not by me, by you. He sat back. You understand what a counseling entry does to a lieutenant? I understand exactly what it does. I have written 11 of them. And you understand that if it is in writing, it is in writing, he said. It does not know how to be proportional. 5 years from now, it is a line in a file, and the man reading it will not know how the beer got there. That is true of everything we write, I said. It is also the only thing that has ever changed anybody's behavior in this Navy. A conversation with no paper behind it is a favor between 2 captains. It is not a correction. He looked at me for a while. You are not asking for much, he said. You could ask for a great deal more. I know what I could ask for, I said. I am asking for 1 page signed by you and his chain, and I never see it. He wrote it. It was 1 page. It went into his own command's process with his signature at the bottom, and my name is not in the body of it anywhere, and to this day I have not read it and I am not going to. That evening, Okonkwo walked out to the parking lot with me, still turning it over. She is 38, and she is going to command something soon, and she was doing what people do at that stage, which is stress test the reasoning of everybody above her. Ma'am, can I ask the last one? Go ahead. Why not just say who you are, in the moment? Right there in the bar. It would have taken 4 words, and it would have stopped it in 1 second, and every person in that room would have learned something. I have thought about that question for a long time, both before she asked it and every week since. Because the day my rank is what makes it wrong, I said. Everybody under that rank is out of luck. She did not answer right away. If I stand up in that bar and say what I am, then the lesson in the room is that he picked the wrong woman, I said. There were 4 other women in that bar on Thursday. 2 of them were about 23 years old. Not one of them had anything on their sleeve. I am not going to teach a room full of people that the rule is about sleeves. She stood there with her keys in her hand. That is a very expensive way to be right, she said. It is, I said. I can afford it. That is the only reason I am the one doing it. Some of what follows I did not see. I heard it later from 3 people who were there and did not think they were telling me anything important at the time. Vandermeer delivered the counseling entry in the first week of April in his office, with the door shut. Prosser had been waiting for it for 2 weeks by then, which was on purpose. He had spent a weekend and then 11 working days, assuming he had insulted somebody's wife. Then he had walked into a conference room and found out otherwise. And then nothing had happened to him at all for a fortnight. That is not cruelty. It is how a chain of command moves when it is being careful. He signed the page. He asked 1 question, and he asked the wrong one, which is not surprising for 28. He asked whether she was going to be involved in his certification. I am told Vandermeer let that sit in the room for a second. You want me to tell you she outranks you, he said. She does. It is the least interesting fact about Thursday. I could not have said it to him myself. Coming from me, it would have been a speech about my own dignity. Coming from his own captain, it was a correction about his character, which is the only correction that has ever worked on anybody. The second thing happened in his platoon, and I know about it because Halverson told a chief, and the chief told my command master chief, and my command master chief told me, which is precisely how information travels on a waterfront and always will. Halverson went to him in the middle of April, at the end of a training day, and said something that I think is the most useful sentence anybody said to Gage Prosser that spring. "Nobody's angry at you," he said. "Everybody just knows now. That is the part you're going to have to live with." They did not bring it up again. Not once. Not as a joke. That platoon simply carried a piece of information about their officer through the entire spring and behaved perfectly around it, and that is a worse sentence than anything a captain could have handed down. A punishment ends. Being known does not. The third thing I saw with my own eyes, and it is the one that actually did the work, and nobody arranged it. The joint workup put his platoon in a lane with my detachment for 6 weeks. That is not a punishment either. That is a calendar. 2 platoons, 1 detachment, and somebody has to go first. In late April, they were on a range east of the city on a day that got to 88 degrees, providing security while my technicians ran a render-safe problem. The technician on the wire that afternoon was a third class named Pilar Estrada, 23 years old, 11 months in the community, exactly the sailor Okonkwo had described in my office. She went down the wire in the full suit. Nobody explains our job to anybody. We just make them stand in the sun and watch it take 40 minutes and they figure it out. I was there because the incoming Commodore goes and stands on ranges, and because I wanted to see how the detachment worked when nobody senior from their own unit was watching. I did not watch Estrada. I have seen 1,000 of those. I watched the security element. For the first 10 minutes, they were a security element. For the second 10 minutes, they were bored, which is correct and healthy. Somewhere in the third 10 minutes, something happened to that group of very fit young men that I have watched happen maybe 200 times in my career and have never once gotten tired of. They understood how long it was taking. They understood that the person out there was alone and was going to be alone for as long as it took, and that there was no version of the afternoon where anybody could help her, and that this was not a bad day. This was Tuesday. This is what the job is on a day when everything goes right. Prosser was on the left in the shade of a vehicle, and he did not take his eyes off her for the last 20 minutes of it. I watched him from 100 meters away with a bottle of water in my hand, and I did not go anywhere near him. When she came out of the suit, she was the color of a brick, and her hair was flat to her head, and he was standing there with a canteen held out. She took it. She did not thank him. She has told me since that she did not consciously decide not to. She was too tired to have decided anything. But I watched her take it and turn away and go sit on the bumper of the truck, and I thought, good. She does not owe him that. In early May, I signed off on the detachment's manning for the deployment, which is a spreadsheet with 41 names on it, and about a third of the way down the second page was the platoon he commanded. Okonkwo was in the office when I initialed it. She watched me not react. "You are really not going to do anything about him," she said. "I already did," I said. "I put him in a lane with Estrada for 6 weeks. "Ma'am, that was the schedule." "I know," I said. "It is still the only thing that was ever going to work." She sat down on the arm of the chair, which she did about twice a year when she was thinking rather than reporting. "He is going to think he got away with it," she said. "He is not," I said. "He is going to think about it every time he sees somebody in a suit for the rest of his career. That is not getting away with it. That is a much longer sentence than I could have written." I would like to be able to tell you that I was serene about all of this. I was not, entirely. There were 2 or 3 nights in that stretch where I lay awake and constructed the version where I stood up off that stool in the bar and took him apart in front of his platoon, sentence by sentence, and it was extremely satisfying, and I could do it in about 90 seconds. Everybody who tells you they never build that version is lying to you. The only thing I can honestly claim is that I did not do it. He came to me in the middle of May, by the vehicles, at the end of a training day. I had known it was coming for about 2 weeks. You can see it building in somebody. He had started arriving early to events I was at and finding reasons to be in the same 40 feet of gravel as me, and twice he had gotten close enough to speak and then not done it. I want to say plainly that I do not hold that against him. It takes a certain amount of spine at 28 to walk up to a captain and open that conversation, and he did eventually walk up. "Ma'am, do you have 5 minutes?" "I have about 90 seconds. He had written it out. I could hear the writing in it the way you can always hear it. He had a first sentence that had been worked on. "Ma'am, I need to apologize for the bar. What I said was inexcusable, and I have thought about it every day since, and I want you to know that it is not who I—" "Lieutenant," I said, "I am not going to take that from you, and you should not want me to." He stopped. He looked like a man who had run into a door in his own house. "Ma'am, if I take it, you are done thinking about it," I said. "You hand it to me. I say something gracious. We both feel better, and by Friday, it is a story you tell about how you learned something. I would rather you were not done." He stood there. To his credit, he did not argue, and he did not fill the silence, which is more discipline than most people have at that age. I gave him one sentence about my face because he was going to construct something in his head anyway, and I would rather he constructed the right thing. "The scar is from a road in Afghanistan in 2011, and the person who did not walk off that road was a first-class technician named Salcido," I said. "That is all of it you get, and I am telling you only so you stop imagining it." He said, "Yes, ma'am," and something happened to his face that I did not enjoy watching. Then I told him the rest, which was the part I actually needed him to hear. "You will be certified on what your platoon can do in the water and on the ground," I said. "The same sheet everybody else gets. The standard has not moved since January, and it is not going to move because of March. If you are looking for me to go easier on you as a favor, I will not. If you are worried I am going to go harder on you out of spite, I will not do that either. And if I catch anybody in my group doing it, I will end their day. That is the whole conversation." "Yes, ma'am." "Go home, Lieutenant." I walked back to the lane. I did not offer to talk again. I did not tell him to come see me if he ever needed anything, and I did not take him under my wing. And I want to be honest that I have been asked about this by 2 different people who thought I was cold about it. Here is my answer. There is a version of this story where I mentor him, where I take the young man who insulted me and I build him into something, and we shake hands at the end, and everybody feels wonderful. I have watched senior people do exactly that, and I have applauded at the ceremony. I did not want it. I am 47 years old, I had a group to take in June, and 41 people going overseas in October, and my attention is not infinite. Every hour I spend on the redemption of a lieutenant who did not need redeeming so much as he needed to grow up is an hour I'm not spending on a strata who has 11 months in the community and is going to be extraordinary, and who has never done anything to me except her job in 88-degree heat. I do not owe him a project. Nobody owes anybody a project. Late in May, my Command Master Chief came to find me. Wendell Roach is 49, a Master Chief Technician, 27 years in, and he has the specific gift that the best Command Master Chiefs have, which is that he tells you the thing you are not going to hear anywhere else. "Ma'am, the whole group knows," he said. "The bar. It went around the waterfront in about 11 days. They are waiting to see if you spend it." "Spend it?" "Yes, ma'am, it is a lot of credit. You could get almost anything out of Group 1 with it right now, and about half the building expects you to." I asked him what he thought I should do. "I think you already decided," he said, "or you would be asking me differently." "I am not going to spend it, Master Chief," I said. "I am going to need it later for something real." He nodded and went away satisfied, and about 6 weeks later, I did need it. Over a manning decision I lost twice before I won it. And having never once cashed the bar in is the reason anybody listened to me the 3rd time. At the very end of May, Deacon Trask called me from Florida. He was 68 and his knees had gone, and somebody had sent him the story, because the community is 9,000 people and it is all one telephone. He asked me one question about it. "Did you handle it or did you win it?" "I handled it." "Good," he said. "Winning it would have cost you more." Then he talked about his knees for 11 minutes and about a boat he was thinking about buying and definitely was not going to buy, and about a dog that had come with the house. I sat in my car in a parking lot and listened to all of it and did not say very much. That was exactly what I needed, and he knew it was, and neither of us said so because we have known each other for 24 years, and that is not how we talk. When I hung up, I sat there for a second with the phone in my lap. Same seat, same posture, same not starting the car, as a Thursday night in March in my own driveway. The difference was that this time there was nothing to sit with. I just did not feel like driving yet. Certification ran 3 days at the end of May. I would like to tell you that I looked for a reason to fail him. I did not have to look. There was not one. His platoon ran the lanes and my detachment ran with them, and they were good. Not remarkable. Good. They took 2 reruns, one on a dive event because of a boat problem that was not their fault, and one on a ground event because of a communication failure that was. And they fixed the second one on the same afternoon, which is the actual test. Nobody cares whether you get it right the first time. Everybody cares what you do in the 40 minutes after you get it wrong. I signed the sheet in the back of a truck with the door open, sitting sideways with my feet on the bumper in the last of the light. Then I handed it to Okonkwo without a comment, and she read it, and she did not say anything either, and I appreciated that more than I told her. Prosser was down the pier, maybe 60 meters away, with his platoon breaking down equipment. He saw me sign it. He did not come over. That was the first correct thing he did in this entire story, without being told to do it, and it is the reason I think he is going to be all right in the long run. He understood that there was nothing to say, and that saying nothing was not weakness. That takes people years. I have not spoken to him since that afternoon in May, and I do not expect to, and there is nothing sad in that. Most of the people you affect in this life, you affect once, and then you both go to work. In the first week of June, the change of command package landed on Okonkwo's desk, which is where every ceremony in the Navy actually lives. The program, the seating, the guest list, the sequence of events, and the biographies, and inside the biography package, the awards. She came into my office holding 2 pieces of paper, and she had a look on her face I had not seen before. "Ma'am, the citation does not say what happened," she said. "It says almost nothing." I knew exactly what she was holding. The Bronze Star citation from 2011 is 1 paragraph long. It says that on a date in March, in support of operations, I distinguished myself by meritorious achievement, that I performed my duties in a professional manner, and that my actions were in keeping with the highest traditions of naval service. It does not say culvert. It does not say second device. It does not say that the officer took the walk herself. It does not say the word Salcedo anywhere in it, because Teo has his own citation in his own file that his mother has a copy of, and because the 2 of them were never written as one event. They were written thin on purpose. The task force we were supporting was operating in a way that nobody was going to describe in an unclassified paragraph in 2011. And the man who wrote my citation wrote around the entire afternoon so carefully that the result is a piece of paper that could describe a supply officer having a good quarter. "It was written that way on purpose," I said. "It is 15 years old, ma'am." I called. There's nothing in that afternoon that is protected anymore. It has not been protected since 2018. She put the second page down. "Somebody should read it, the real one, in front of the group." I said no. I said no fairly quickly and with a reason that sounded good, which is always the sign that I have not actually thought about something. I said that a change of command is about the command and not about the officer, and that the whole point of 15 years of not talking about it was not talking about it. She said, "Yes, ma'am," and took the pages and left, and I sat in the office for a while. Here's what changed my mind, and it did not happen until about 11 at night. I have heard that citation read out loud 3 times in 15 years. At an award ceremony in 2011, in a hospital with my jaw wired. At a change of command in 2017. At a retirement in 2022, where somebody read my whole record. I have never once heard his name in it. 3 readings in 15 years of the official account of the worst 90 seconds of my life. And the man who was walking back to the safe line when it happened has never been in the room, because the paperwork is organized by person and not by afternoon. That is not anybody's malice. It is not even a mistake. It is just what a filing system does, and I had let a filing system be the only version of that day that ever gets said out loud in public. I called Okonkwo at 6 the next morning and told her to have the narrative read in full. Then I called Texas. Teo's mother is 71. She lives in the house he grew up in, outside a town north of Houston, and I have called her every March for 15 years. And she has sent me a card every Christmas for 15 years. And neither of us has ever once discussed the arrangement. I asked her permission to say her son's name out loud at a ceremony in June in front of about 400 people in California. She said yes before I finished the sentence. Then she asked me what the weather was like out here, and whether I was eating, because that is how people talk when the real thing is too big to fit in a phone call. We talked for 20 minutes about the weather in her garden and a nephew who had bought a truck he could not afford. She never went back to it. I never went back to it either. I hung up at about 9:10 at night, and I put the printed citation on the kitchen counter with a pen next to it. And I stood there and looked at the two of them for a while. I did not write anything that night. I did not know yet what I was going to say. All I knew was that for the first time in 15 years, the version that was going to be read out loud was going to be the true one, and that I was the one who had waited this long to allow it. The change of command was on a Friday morning in June, on the concrete apron behind the group headquarters, with the water at our backs and about 400 chairs set out in rows that Roach had personally measured because he is that kind of master chief. The group formed up in service dress. 400 and some people who were about to be mine, standing in ranks in the sun, most of whom I had met exactly once. Estrada was in the second rank of the second unit from the left. I knew where she was because I had looked for her, which I am admitting to. Okonkwo had run the seating. My mother could not travel and watched on a laptop in Ohio, and in the second row, on the aisle, where the chief staff officer had put him without ever mentioning it to me, was Deacon Trask, 68 years old, in a suit that had fit him in 2009. He had flown himself out again, 15 years later, out of his own pocket again, on knees that do not work. The ceremony went the way they all go for the first 11 minutes. Invocation, honors, the outgoing Commodore's remarks, which were generous and slightly too long, and then the awards and the biography. Then the narrative was read. Not the paragraph. The account. The whole of that afternoon in March of 2011, read out in a clear voice over a public address system into 400 people and a row of folding chairs full of civilians. The road, the culvert, the device that had been marked by a patrol the day before, the second signature 11 meters back that would not resolve, the officer in charge who ordered her senior technician back to the safe line and put the suit on and made the approach herself. The second device, in the flat spot, behind the line, the 90 seconds, and the name. Explosive Ordnance Disposal Technician, First Class, Teodoro Salcedo, 26 years old, who was walking back to the safe line because his officer had told him to. I stood through it at attention, with my hands at my sides, and I did not look at the crowd. I looked at a point on the water past the last row of chairs, and I breathed the way you are taught to breathe, and I got through it. I had heard that citation read 3 times in 15 years. I had never once heard his name in it. Then I read my orders, and I took the group, and I gave my remarks, which were 140 words long because I had written them at a kitchen counter and counted them. Most of it was about the people in the ranks in front of me, and remarks are for the day they are given. I will give you the end of it, because I meant it more than anything I have ever said into a microphone. Everything I know how to do, I learned from a master chief who failed me on my qualification board because I answered too fast, and from a first class who talked out loud to his own hands so his officer would always know how he was doing, I said. One of them is in the second row this morning. The other one is the reason I stand this way. Petty Officer Salcedo has been the standard in this command for 15 years without anybody saying his name at a ceremony. That ends today. Then I said, I have the watch. And it was done. And 400 people sat down at once with that sound that 400 people make. Afterward, there was coffee and sheet cake on tables under a canopy, and it took me 40 minutes to get across 60 feet of concrete. Trask waited me out. He knows how these things work. He stood by a table with a cup he was not drinking from, exactly the way he had sat my board in 2002. And when I finally got to him, he looked at me for a second and delivered his review. Still too fast. Still working on it, Master Chief. Better, though, he said, which from him is a citation of its own. And then he asked whether there was any cake left that was not the corner piece, because he does not like frosting, and we went and found out. Somebody was holding up a phone at the end of the table with Teo's mother on it. She had watched the whole thing on a video call from a kitchen in Texas at 8 a.m. her time. She did not want to talk on camera to a crowd. She wanted to see the water behind me, so about 6 people spent a while turning a telephone around so a woman in Texas could look at the Pacific Ocean. Prosser was in that formation somewhere. I never looked for him. I am telling you that plainly because it is the truest thing in this story. On the morning it all paid off, the man who started it was not in my mind at all. And I did not go home and think about him either. And if I had not sat down to tell you this, I am not sure I would have thought about him again this year. That is what it looks like when you actually let something go. Not forgiveness, exactly. Just a lack of interest. That evening, I drove back to the headquarters after everybody had gone, because there was a stack of things on a desk that was now mine, and I parked in the same spot in the lot where I had stood in February in jeans looking up at a building that belonged to somebody else. I sat in the car without starting it, which you may have noticed I do. 2 windows were still lit on the second deck. Somebody was working late on a Friday in June, and I did not know yet which one of my people it was, and I remember thinking that finding out was going to be the whole job. Here is what I would tell you, if you got this far. Somebody is going to be wrong about you this week. Not maliciously. Somebody at a desk or a counter or the end of a bar is going to decide what you are from 4 feet away, and they are going to be completely incorrect, and you will get to choose what that is. It can be a fight. It can just be Tuesday. I have been on both sides of that choice, in a bar and in a parking lot and in a hospital with a towel over the mirror. And I can tell you that the quiet one is the only one you can actually live inside. The loud version feels better for about 90 seconds. I know exactly how long 90 seconds is. That's the whole of it. A stool at the quiet end of a bar, a road in southern Afghanistan in 2011, and a Friday morning in June where 400 people finally heard Teo Salcedo's name read out loud in the place it belonged. I've been asked more than once whether I should have stood up off that stool and told that lieutenant exactly who I was. I still don't think so, but I would genuinely like to know what you would have done. Would you have said it right there in the bar in front of his whole platoon? And if you had been his captain that night, would you have explained it to him in the parking lot? Or would you have let him walk out not knowing? If somebody has ever decided what you were from 4 feet away and been completely wrong about it, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I do read them. And if this one hit home, hit subscribe.